Even if you've dedicated your life to a righteous and noble cause, you might still not be obeying God if you're ignoring abortion. Hey, this is Nathan for the Revelation 3:2 Project. Recently, I was out in my city, a very pro-abortion city, advocating on behalf of preborn kids. I was holding a sign that looked like this, and after about an hour of, either being ignored or berated, I was approached by, of all people, a pro-life woman.
I'm super against abortion. I'm surprised that somebody thinks the same as me.
You'd be more.
Are you like me? Yeah.
We appreciate the compliments and the support that people like this give, but I'm not satisfied with it. So I went ahead and I challenged her.
Just scared.
Good for you.
Well,
I appreciate it.
since you appreciate it, here's how you can appreciate it. You can help us at least once a week on this area or somewhere wherever you live. You just got to give time.
You know, I run a non-profit organization, and that absorbs all my time. And I'm running a family, and so.
Now you see why it continues, because while I'm sure you're doing good things,
Yeah.
Everybody's filling their life.
I educated 100 young women about it.
educated
so,
them.
Yeah.
How's that
They
going
are in
today?
my program.
So I looked at this woman's charity, and as far as I can tell, it's legit. They don't appear to be scamming anybody. They're not just shoveling money at a problem. They're helping people develop job skills, orphans mostly, help them develop job skills in Haiti. That's good stuff. I mean, they're not pushing an anti-Christian agenda as far as I can tell, or some sort of new world order. They're legitimately helping people who legitimately need help in a way that legitimately does help them. I mean, that's great. I mean, normally when I challenge pro-life people to be involved in fighting abortion to a greater degree, they give me excuses that are basically excuses. They aren't nearly as understandable as the reasons this woman gave me. Pro-life people are generally Christians, and when they tell me they can't be involved, it's usually that they're too busy with something that's, much more normative and in fact rather selfish. I got to focus only on my family. I got to build my career. I got to prepare a comfortable retirement for myself. The sort of things that Jesus told us not to worry about and instead focus on, seeking first the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness. And if a Christian is involved in some kind of ministry, it's generally something not nearly as, obviously good as helping poverty-stricken people in one of the worst, most violent and exploited countries on the face of the earth. It's usually something like, a men's ministry or a Bible study or a retreat of some kind, or the music ministry, or being an usher or something like that. So essentially this woman, she is, she's surpassing and going beyond 99.9% of the Christian population so far as concerns doing love and good works. And I don't even know if she's a believer. Nevertheless, this is what I said to her.
Okay, I mean that's.
I do my part.
Well, I don't know, man. Everybody thinks that, but I'll take your word for it. Please consider the HLA literature.
That's
It can
a little
come.
rude.
I'm sorry, ma'am. It's just that
No,
everybody
no, no.
says that, and that's why we can't get anybody out here to help.
Now, why would I dare to tell this poor woman that she should in any way consider detracting from the good work that she was already doing to give any time to fighting abortion, And the answer is that I have to be consistent. I have to be. If I limit myself to challenging only those Christians who are, the lowest common denominator, just living a basically go along to get along lifestyle, and I give a pass to anybody who's rising above that level and actually giving of themselves to something worthwhile, I'm still not giving preborn children the respect and the dignity that they deserve. It's better to be involved in something self-sacrificial and so forth, as this woman is. But I'd be lying if I told you that it was as important as, dealing with the greatest human rights violation in the history of the world. And frankly, everybody, including people who were engaged in stuff like this woman was engaged in, are excusing themselves in the same manner.
Don't you think the evangelists think the same thing?
What's that?
Don't you think the churches think the same thing when they tell me they got the whole schedule planned for the whole year until 2020 happened and they had to scrap it all because of COVID, but they still wouldn't help me? Everybody says it. I'm too busy. I got a family. I'm too busy. I got things going on. Everybody says it.
You know what? I am doing my part. I was
Are you
just
sure?
telling you about the part that I'm doing, and you're offending me.
Helping orphans raise themselves out of poverty is a good and noble and just thing to do. But helping stop a Holocaust, a brutal murder of, 1 million people a year, that's the U.S. abortion rate, is better.
Those people are starving. You know, they
Okay.
don't have education, they don't have health care,
Okay.
and
Well,
I work
that's-
my ass off for them. So you don't tell me that everybody's saying that, because nobody does what I do.
Maybe very few people do, ma'am, and you're doing far more than I
So
think
don't
most
judge.
people would. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but there are
Do you believe in
priorities.
Jesus?
Dying of malnutrition, okay, that's a tragedy. But being murdered out in cold blood is not just a tragedy, it's also an injustice. Giving somebody a better quality of life is a good thing, but giving them life itself is better, objectively better. We can't just ignore that. So my encounter with this woman is not unusual. It happens all the time with Christians of all kinds. Here's another clip of an encounter that happened recently in Southern California where, the anti-abortionists approached a van driven by some charity workers, Christian charity workers, who were driving around trying to help the homeless.
And so I'm just telling you what the greatest need, the most urgent need is the controversial issue of abortion murder.
But that's the calling that God put upon your
No.
heart
It's a
to
command of
work
Scripture,
right
ma'am.
now. And I'm not saying that it's not all of our responsibility, but our primary mission, based on our calling from God, is to serve the homeless. And He has not directed us to involve that with abortion
Ma'am,
politics.
the problem is the vast majority of churches use that same excuse. They don't come out.
But it's,
That's the problem.
It's not to be meant as an excuse. It's an explanation.
That-
as to
that-
why
that's what
we're
it
not
is, though.
standing out there and we're going around picking up homeless people.
What is disturbing about this is that the homeless workers don't seem to even notice the massive disparity between the number of people who are assisting in their ministry, which is at least 6 or a dozen, probably more than that, to help. I don't know how many homeless people they have in the town, but it can't be, more than 1,000 or so, versus the one woman who's usually outside that abortion mill dealing with the thousands of kids that are going to be murdered that year. They don't even seem to notice that that's kind of, lopsided as they drive their van, which is usually parked by a church just a few blocks from the abortion mill.
We
Yeah.
are Christians, and we did want you to understand that you have the calling to be right there on the
It's
front
not a
lines
calling,
for an
man.
abortion.
It's a command.
And we have the calling to be right on the front lines for the homeless.
But there's a lot of you, and there's one of me.
There's only 3 of us in this van.
But I mean, there's a
would
lot of you.
Try to drop
in
one of
the
them off.
You
ministry.
guys
Here.
take it to a different level because we're just field workers, just like
But you have like
guys are.
6 vans,
There's
so you have to have
3 people
6
here.
drivers.
Usually there's just one. 2 of us are out of town. She's from Oklahoma, I'm from Kansas. And I'm here right now because she's by herself on the sidewalk all the time.
So
The
you know
churches
what?
have abandoned her.
We also have to take into account that unlike poverty, abortion is not, something we just have to accept as the perpetual state of life on planet Earth. Jesus said we would always have the poor, they'd always be with us, and we could help them anytime we wish. But we don't always have things like abortion. We don't always have parents murdering their own children. Abortion is an anomaly, a moral, spiritual, and cultural anomaly. It grew out of the sexual revolution in the same way that the transatlantic slave trade and racial slavery grew out of European colonialization of the New World. And like slavery and like the segregation that followed it, we don't have to just assume abortion is a problem that will take centuries to solve and we just got to get used to it in the meantime. No, it could be solved very quickly, in fact, at least in the U.S., if the people who know it's wrong, if all the Christians gave it the attention that it deserved for at least a period of time and dealt with the problem. Then that problem would go away. Now, some of you are going to argue that things just aren't as simple as I'm making them out to be, and you'd be correct. You would be correct. For instance, generally people should keep their promises. And if the woman that I talked to in my first video had already, essentially adopted hundreds of orphans in some way and was teaching them essential job skills that they needed to survive, she can't just walk away from that completely, And I recognize that. And okay, we also have to take into account that even if abortion could be eradicated very quickly if all the Christians were involved, right now that's not happening. Most Christians are standing on the sidelines. And so in the meantime, those of us who are involved, the principle of good stewardship of time dictates that there may be, from time to time, other acute problems that arise that we should deal with while we continue to pursue the end of abortion and continue to try to bring more Christians onto the bandwagon with that. Yeah, I know at the ground level it's hard to predict what's going to be the results of any particular action that we take, but we shouldn't just ignore at the same time the ongoing slaughter of kids week in and week out, while instead we focus completely on causes that are, on the whole, less important. If you still think it's unreasonable for me to challenge people like the woman in my first video, let me leave you with a thought experiment that you can ponder. Imagine that this woman was, in Haiti, doing her charity work when another one of that nation's, frequent earthquakes happened. And suddenly there's 1 million people or more who are in immediate threat of dying from, falling debris, from fires, from flooding, from what have you. Should this woman just continue on like normal, just doing her regular charity work, teaching people job skills? Or should she change things and mobilize her charity to deal with the immediate problem at hand? Do you really think, in that sort of situation, she should just maintain the status quo, carry on like usual, and tell herself